every gut instinct I have tells me this guy looks ridiculous, like an absolute cartoon, I will be open-minded to seeing what happens.
Hey friend, and welcome back to my channel. Hi if you're new here, hi if you're not. I'm going to do a little bit of preamble before we get into the interview today. First of all, big shout out to Harrison over at Gym Lessons for coming here and having this conversation with me. Super excited to dive into our conversation. Without giving away too many details, we're going to be talking about his experience hiring a business coach. We get into a lot of different conversations about scope of practice, the intention behind why people charge for their coaching services, different and common manipulation tactics we see in the space. And I guess I kind of just wanted to preface the interview by letting you know that there might be a few jump cuts in terms of the editing of the video, just because our conversation kind of did really go all over the place. And I wanted to kind of leave it as concise as possible. And so if you notice any sort of harsh cuts in the conversation, it's not that I'm taking anything out of context. It was just that there were certain pieces I actually wanted to save for a completely separate video. So if you watch this conversation and you enjoy it, and maybe you have some key takeaways from it, and you would be interested in seeing a part 2 more sort of interview / deep dive hybrid, please let me know in the comments down below, because again, I do have that portion of the conversation saved, and I would love to continue it if it's something that you're interested in seeing. All that to say, I am super excited to share this conversation with you. If you're someone who has been negatively impacted by the coaching industry, as always, I have my scam story submission form linked in the description, and I'll have all of Harrison's info linked down there as well. Quick shout out to my channel VIP members before we get started. If you're interested in learning about my channel membership, you can click the join button down below. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel. Let's go ahead and jump right in.
Yeah, so my name is Harrison Lessons. I've been a online trainer for the past 2 years and a personal trainer at large ever since 2011, all through Maryland, New York City, Illinois, and now South Dakota. But I have about 80 to 85 people I work with, really just all over the country. In my current online training iteration.
So I guess the reason why we're all gathered here today, I'd love to hear your story about how, as a personal trainer, you kind of got caught up or entangled into the coaching space, what that experience was like, and sort of where you're at now.
Well, I think that the pandemic really changed a lot of things for people. And I think a big part of that is that, so much of gyms got closed. So then the opportunity of freedom, which is a big pull in a lot of the business coaching space in terms of what they're promising you, time for money freedom, or opportunities that kind of break away from the corporate mold, all those exist. And so the pandemic allowed a lot of those opportunities to really manifest themselves. And so for me, when I was first had the gym I worked for at the time shut down during the pandemic, I had to do a lot of virtual one-on-ones and just get that whole feeling of, okay, we don't have to be in the same place at the same time. With trainers, the challenge for a lot of trainers, at least in our usual long-standing profession, is that we're often working when other people aren't, because people have to make themselves available. We have the people who, of course, will train 9, 10 in the morning, the majority of our time, 6, 7 in the morning, 8, 9 at night. And it's very difficult to build a quality work-life balance when you're always working when other people are free. And then especially as I'm going into my 30s, now I'm 33, I'm looking at, okay, I want to start building a future. I know this has been very helpful for me for what I wanted to do, but having freedom is going to allow me those opportunities to have more flexibility so that I can start creating that kind of dynamic for myself. So, and like I said, I think, as I was saying beforehand, a lot of what gets people involved with business coaches, multi-level marketing, or really any of these different opportunities is that, that hope they sell you, or that promise of just opportunity and freedom. And for me, I had gone through this kind of phase back when I was super early on in college in a different iteration. 2 times. One, I had gone, and in high school, it was the whole, someone says, hey, man, let's catch up. The guy from high school we haven't talked to in a while. Before you know it, you're in someone's basement being pitched on selling electricity to people for a slightly lower rate. And then your main way of making money is getting other people to sell electricity at lower rates.
Did you do that? Or you just
No.
went to a sales pitch?
No, I got enwrapped in the sales pitch.
Okay.
I went 2 for 3 instead of in place of dodging these. So that was number one. Number two was an arguably more ridiculous situation where the latest grift is apparently it was called Cutco, I believe, and I think that their idea was that you'd be a door-to-door kitchen knife salesman, as if anyone really wants going to show up to their door selling kitchen knives, and that was going to be my path to financial freedom and bliss. And so
now, did someone offer that to you? Or like, I know Cutco is infamous for posting job ads on like LinkedIn or Indeed that you apply to thinking it's like a real job, and then it turns out it's like a knife salesman position. So I'd be curious to know.
It was so long ago because it had been like a decade ago. Just the only real core memory I've been scarred with that was and this is, I don't know if many multi-level marketing places do this where they leave like plants. I don't know, but basically we were all in a group setting where we're all being brought in for interviews for this prestigious position. And I guess to make us feel better, the person in front of me walked out and just started busting out fake crying on their knees and like a really dramatic C-list acting level of thing. And I'm like, I mean, it's good, but I don't know if it's like worth all that. And then I get there and all of a sudden, like, it wasn't like what 3 questions they offered to me. And I'm like, what about this purely devastated position? Then my head, and then like as like the wheels started connecting, like this is definitely a person they put in to make it seem like they got turned down. So the rest of us marks would feel more qualified that we got this. Needless to say, I didn't do it. That's the main thing. But when I saw a lot of these different things, the energy thing, Cutco, it already had primed my ears for like how these elements worked. The whole thing with the office where he's drawing the pyramid on the whiteboard kind of deal.
Phil has recruited me and another guy. Now we are getting 3 people each. The more people that get involved, the more people who are investing, the more money we're all going to make. It's not a pyramid scheme. It's not even a scheme per se. It's
like, yeah, like I already seen this. So that's what makes this worse for me, at least almost, is that I thought I kind of already knew what this was and how to avoid it, which makes it, you know, arguably worse when we go to strike 3, which is the one I didn't dodge, where it showed up in a slightly different iteration of a business coach. Like I said, I had been doing a lot of these back to the present day at the time, about 2 years ago. I'd been riding off this virtual high of a lot of just really prestigious success. Like I'm probably making more than I did in person in a gym. And I see a lot of opportunities. Okay, I can train seeing my friends in Colorado or North Carolina, wherever else I want to go. I don't have to be up at 6 a.m, commuting on a train, paying a lot of money, living in an expensive city. I can really cut costs while building more balance. Like it's a very tempting offer. And so that's
and
really
so were you training virtually already? Or
yeah,
you had
okay. But what I was training virtually as was one-on-ones. How you see a lot of business coaching in its current iteration is not that, because their whole pitch is not trading time for money. And you're effectively still doing that in the same way like I'm making time to like talk here. I'd be making time to do a session, like here's your reps, here's your lat raises, whatever I'm showing and instructing you. But in the current iteration for how it is, granted, it can come in a lot of different forms, but how it's traditionally taught with a lot of business coaches is programming. And I want to be clear, there's nothing inherently wrong with programming. I actually think it's a better business model for training for a lot of people with certain limitations. And I think if you really focus your effort on those, it actually helps. You know, like, you know, I was looking at one of your videos way back where you talk about how you like to help people, but you don't want to like charge them a premium. You know, you offer them payment plans, but don't charge an elevated rate. And so when you work in a gym environment with in-person training, you only make money when you have one-on-one appointments. So there's this implicit pressure to say, hey, you know, if you train with me more often, you'll get better results, whether or not it's realistic for them, whether or not it's doable for them. And so especially when you work for gyms that have metrics, when you're offering that kind of position, there's always a financial underkey where the money's directing the fitness instead of the fitness necessarily directing the money. So when you work in more of a subscription service, I found I can write 2 workouts for someone, I can write 7 workouts for someone. And instead of worrying about charging them more for more workouts, it's more about giving them something that works for them at a recurrent rate that just meets the market demand and what I feel is fair for all involved. And ultimately, it just keeps the focus on them and not on the money. And so that's where I've seen a better shift with that. But that kind of comes into the problem of where that kind of shift goes. It's so new to make it as a primary business model. And I think only a few places have really started to do that well. And in the same vein, which I've seen on videos of yours where you talk about a lack of standardization when it comes to life coaching or any kind of certification, any kind of board that overarching standards. There really is none for that for online training. So it really is just the wild, wild west. And so, I'd done very well in a virtual one-on-one medium. And I thought, okay, like, I'm doing awesome. I made crap tons of money. The stimulus checks are coming in. Everything's looking good. And instead of just feeling like there's this opportunity, I feel like I didn't have enough, I got to admit, I got cocky. I got arrogant. And it caused me to overlook a bunch of red flags that I normally would have avoided. So I had been contacted in this case by a friend and former manager at a gym that I previously worked at. As soon as I had officially, cut ties with the gym to move fully independent. And he mentioned this person who had left themselves from that gym. They had moved to Miami and they had gone into coaching for business. Now, I had never been exposed to these people in my realm. I didn't even know they had really infiltrated that space. And so I didn't ask enough questions, and that's on me. And I didn't ignore the Mandarin's parade of red flags that were presenting themselves throughout the process, of which I'll list alongside. But the long and short is, he had mentioned how he had seen a lot of success with this guy and that I could see similar success too. And I'm like, okay. And here's the grip. What really helps, and I think what really puts people in disadvantageous positions, is when friends whom you trust or people that you trust lead you into positions for which they don't necessarily have a lot of skin in the game, and if they have some sort of underlying incentive to do so, which I didn't believe they did. I just thought they were helping me out.
So you had already started taking virtual clients. Your friend recommended you to this individual. And then what did that kind of look like?
So here's the practical element. Like, for me, especially having this large precedent success, but also wanting to be open-minded to my friend and what he said, I didn't really understand or know what this would look like, 2020, okay, that's 3 years ago, actually. So 2020 version of Harrison was, because my only experience is in a one-on-one medium. It's a foreign concept to me. So my cup's empty. I'm ready to learn. So I get on the call with this person finally, and he just goes straight for the throat. Hey, so just so you know, my program costs $12,000, but for you, I'll do $8,500. I'm like, all right, settle down, man. All right, like, this is probably going to do worse for you getting me to give you like 8,500 cents, much less $8,500. So let's relax. Like, I'm already sold. Don't oversell it. Which, again, that's on me, because I looked in this guy's social media, and like I said, you're not going to put any, but you can look at it for yourself and scroll through the past feeds. It's all the stuff here. The standard cringe pattern interrupts, like college was a lie here. And
I'm 25 and own a Lamborghini. If you don't, you're a loser.
Yeah, effectively. And in this case, he puts a Batman logo on it, and he calls it the Batmobile. He's throwing up stacks of cash with DMX playing in the background because he helped make this guy a bunch of money. And then I'm just sitting here I go to my friend who refers to me, this guy looks like a schmuck. I'm telling you, this guy looks like Jordan Belfort on Wish. What is this? I'm like, but you know what? I'm not going to judge. I trust my friend. I'm not going to lose the message for the messenger. Maybe he has something to teach me. And if you vouch for him, even though every gut instinct I have tells me this guy looks ridiculous, like an absolute cartoon, I will be open-minded to seeing what happens. And that's why I think it's so great the channel like you have that exists, is because you're big on consumer protection by exposing people to red flags on common trends. And had I been exposed to this content 3 years ago, there's no way I would have touched this with a 50-foot pole. But I digress. Back to the matter at hand, I'm continuing forward with him. And I signed the contract. I should have read it more there. And you have a copy of the contract too, so you can see this as well. I looked through there because already I'm getting a weird vibe from his very pushy energy. And so now the red flag, the radar's going up here. I'm a little suspicious. I look at the refund policy. Now, granted, I did this after already signing. Again, that is 1,000% on me. You should always look at what you sign. And when you go into, once you give these people your money, regardless of whatever refund policy there, and at least in the United States, they have every power in the sun not to give you your money back, regardless of what it says on paper. But the fact is, I gave them the money in separate payments just because there's certain limitations with Venmo and Zelle under which you can send people. Zelle, for the record, gives you far more protection to get your money back than Venmo. Pro tip for anyone who gets in these situations. And credit cards even more so. So if you do choose to get...
Sorry, so in the States, you guys don't have like Interac e-transfer, right? So like Zelle and Venmo are like the way you send money between bank accounts?
You have all sorts of different ways to do so. I know Zelle directly connects to bank accounts. I know Venmo doesn't go directly to bank. Like Venmo goes into its own pool, similar to
like
PayPal. Yeah, and I know Zelle does directly connect to bank accounts here.
Gotcha.
But I'll get to that later. The point is, I look at his refund policy, right? So right now, it's this custom deal I'm getting of $8,500 relative to the downsell from $12,000, which is already ridiculous in and of itself. But I'm looking at it, and here's the fine print here, because it said, one other thing I said, 100% money back guarantee. There's nothing guaranteed about any of this, and the fine print is the devil in the details. So what it says here is, if you don't make back $8,500 in a single calendar year, whatever you've made from the program, I will then refund you the difference. So I'm like, all right, let me do the math. Click, click, click. Okay, 8,500 divided by 12. That's not even 1,000 a month. So you're telling me that me as a very successful trainer who's making thousands a month already with my own existing business, that the standard for your elite business coach I'm paying $8,500 for is I have to make less than 1,000 a month from your program. If I don't do that within a whole calendar year, then you'll give me the difference. But if I happen to make, what, 800 a month for the next year, that somehow is going to be warranting this massive investment I'm making in you. And then on top of that, too, I started asking questions like, hey, so how do I itemize between virtual one-on-one sessions I'm doing with someone and this? Because you're proposing I do a different product. Because if this is what we're going to do, the last thing I'm going to do is itemize my existing business and then give you credit for it. Because if this is how the contracts work, I'm not going to say, okay, if I'm doing virtual one-on-one sessions, which is not the service you're having me offer, I'm not going to say I made the money back because I'm already doing that. It's only with this variation. So how do we track that? How do we itemize that? All fair questions, I would like to think. But the response I was given was, oh, don't think so much. I'm like, dude, at least like warm me up before you gaslight me on this. Like, yes, I'm going to ask questions. If you're going to be very anal and not even give me a refund for this. So I gave him the money. We were supposed to start for our period like a month later. So it's 2 weeks in. I asked, hey, man, this seems kind of dicey in terms of this, and you're not really giving me a lot of clarity of how we itemize this. I'd rather just have my money back. And, you're a millionaire, right? You've got plenty of clients. You don't need my help. This is a drop in the bucket for you, right? Well, he didn't want to let us, you signed a contract, you have to agree to it. Like, okay, well, if that's the case, then we got to really itemize these differences. Like, if I'm consulting you for like business advice and I'm doing something that's similar that I've already been doing, it would be weird if you take credit for what I'm already doing, because that's kind of how a lot of my industry works in terms of where you see fast success versus slow success. And what I've kind of noticed, not just in my experience, but on the greater trend of how this may go for business coaching on a greater scheme, because that's more your territory than mine, but it's how I noticed for a lot of coaches is that if people succeed very fast, the coach is going to 100% take credit for that, regardless of the situations that may prevail into that. And that's kind of more, once I actually saw how the program was written, and then I saw how a lot of marketing was with other coaches, it became very apparent to me that there's certain people in any kind of industry who are primed for fast success. And those come from being an authority, from having an existing base of trust built up with people who are ready to purchase from you. It takes time to establish that. So the problem is a lot of these coaches will promote strategies that I will agree will probably help if you already have an existing base, but that already takes away from the natural prevailing belief you probably would have succeeded without them, and not that they were to put you over the top. So for instance, if I were going to an influencer and I was proposing some of the strategies that I'm about to list that I was, indicated, if I have 300,000, 3 million followers, and I have 3,000 people ready to buy? Was my elite business coaching, my manifesting, my visualization journaling that put me over the top? Or was the fact that I've already established authority and I could literally put almost anything out in front of my customers and they probably would be ready to buy because they trust me? And that's not something a business coach helps develop. That's just something you develop through time, experience, putting out the right copy, following through on your word, acting as some kind of authority in whatever sphere you're in, being entertaining. These are things a business coach doesn't necessarily do. And I wish a lot of these people would call themselves more of what they are, which is sales coaches. They teach you how to sell. They don't teach you how to run a business. There's no infrastructure. The intro lessons are all about, what's your ideal client? What's all this? Like stuff you can just go on your YouTube channel and find readily available. Stuff you can read any manual under the sun. Like you don't need to pay, a small fortune of your money for this. It's readily available content. And you can't just repackage it and purpose it with some inflated price tag because you want to take people's perceptions, I think, because you're charging a premium that is somehow more valuable than it actually is. So we are meeting once a week to discuss and building on progress here. And the first things I'm told are like, what's my ideal client, how to reach out to people. And it's just all the cringe stuff, cold DMing, if someone even looks at my Instagram story, it's the whole, hey, I saw you looked at my Instagram story. Do you want to buy from me? Not that, but that's like the energy underlying it. You can't teach out these very inefficient concepts, treat them as gospel, and then be surprised when people don't succeed. Or if it does actually work, it's probably because they already trust you or are going to buy from you no matter what you said to them in response. But for people who haven't established themselves as authority, that's 100% not going to work. Like this stuff takes time. It takes, momentum. When you're promising, 6-figure months, oh, this person succeeded in 90 days. Why didn't you? It's like, well, people are at different stages of like how ready they are to scale, how ready they are as an authority. And you have to, if someone's trying to lose weight as a trainer, I can't promise them they're going to lose 100 pounds in a month if their systems don't necessarily support that. I can tell them, this is the scale of what healthy weight loss is. Here are the steps I can do to help you that. And then from there, where can I stack the deck in success for you? And then how do you celebrate small, consistent wins that'll build up over a long time? Because even if I do get you very fast success, it's not likely sustainable. And that's a big problem with a lot of these coaches is that say you do have a readily available source of people who are ready to buy from you. They don't teach you any infrastructure. So a lot of times, even if they do come out the gate swinging and do see a lot of initial success, they don't teach almost any infrastructure and actual SOPs in which you have to interact with clients. Because that's the big difference. If I'm here training you on Google Meet or live or whatever, there's an actual dialogue, there's an engagement, there's a human connection even over like a video medium. When you don't have that on a programming standpoint, it takes a lot more work to keep that up. So oftentimes, I'll befriend clients on Instagram. I'll send them memes. I'll chat them up. We'll have fun. Obviously, we'll get results. We'll show all that. But it's building a personal relationship. It's having occasional video check-ins where I'm building in that connection. They don't teach you any of this. That's the problem. It's because that's really the secret sauce. How you maintain it is the relationship that underlies it. So when you teach really scummy ways that just go with client acquisition or sales, whether it's shame tactics or whether it's feigned desperation, whatever it is, you're already building a foundation on inherent manipulation that's going to be laying in the subtext of your interactions. And there's no way that's built to last. And so then when you're actually interacting with people, I think the first month I was with this person, I didn't even know what I was selling. I'm like, all right, I hate to keep coming back to this, but what is the actual product? How do you expect me to sell a product if I don't even know what it is? It's like, oh, just promise them the dream and we'll build before you're ready.
We need to talk about this. So this, I don't think I've actually ever talked about this on my channel, but a common thing that narrative that is taught in the coaching space, business coaching specifically, is come up with a product idea. You don't have to actually build the product. You don't have to build the course. You don't have to build the program. You just come up with the idea, sell it, put it out there, sell it to people. And once people buy it, AKA you prove that it's something people want, then you can go ahead and build it. I remember being in a community meeting. This was 6 months ago. I'm an ambassador for a particular program. I won't name it specifically, but there's a lot of coaches in this space that I'm in. And so I'm on this call where we get put into, you can get into a breakout room or whatever on Zoom. So I'm with primarily coaches and me talking about, you know, our latest offers in our business. And this one individual is talking about, like, I'm thinking about building an online course. And so I shared my experience. Like, I built out this online course. I spent, like, you know, quite some time building it. And when I put it for sale, only one person bought it. So I had to, like, go back to the drawing board and figure out how I was going to reconfigure it to sell it. And so somebody else was like, well, Danielle, like, you wasted a lot of time. That was a really silly decision. You should have just done what I did, which was come up with the idea for the course, sell it. And then she said once she made like $2,000 in sales, then she built the course in 8 hours. And I was like, again, it comes back to this idea of scalability, quality, that kind of thing. I'm like, to me, first of all, there was a lot of lessons I learned in building an entire course from start to finish. And second of all, my course is focused on actually teaching something super specific. And I wouldn't be able to do that in 8 hours. I spent 2 weeks building this course because to me, the quality of the product is more important than just like making a bunch of money and half-ass throwing something at the client. So I think this idea of like, just sell people on the dream is such a common narrative that, again, just gets perpetuated down the pyramid, that everyone starts to think that it's normal and it's okay.
And to take it a step further, because I've seen this stuff in other content you've put, I want to put this connection that I've kind of seen here. A lot of people who want to help in the coaching space, like the initial people coming in wanting to help, whether they have good intentions or whether they're just the hero of their own story and they're just delusional to what's happening. Either way, they believe or they do want to help. Do you find in your experience, you cover a lot more of this broadly than I do, that they poke and say, oh, you know, you just have imposter syndrome. You don't believe you're capable of success. Do you notice a lot of that?
Definitely. And it's like any time where you aren't like, you don't achieve the success you want, it comes back onto you for like not having the right mindset or not doing enough personal development.
And here's kind of the rip of how I find that whole idea so manipulative. It's like, it's not imposter syndrome if I literally just don't understand what I'm doing. I'm just clueless. There's a difference. Imposter syndrome means, hey, I'm more capable. I have a precedent of success, but I don't believe I'm worthy for it. I forget how capable I actually am. If you aren't actually telling me what I'm doing, it's not imposter syndrome. You're just leaving me hanging into like completely lost into what I'm doing. Or let me give an example here. I'm going to draw an analogy. Say I want to climb Mount Everest, right? And I could hire a Sherpa, someone who's very talented, has accreditation, has a precedent for success. But no, I hire someone who says, hey, you know, climb 10,000 steps a day for the next 10,000 days, and I'll climb here and I'll show you the secret strategy. So I get to this mountain. And so what does he do? He binds my hands, he blindfolds me, and I'm running up a hill. And then I get to the mountain and I climb Everest. Did I succeed, or did I succeed in spite of strategies that were clearly not built for me to succeed, that I was probably going to succeed anyway? I don't know if that analogy makes any sense, but like that's how I view so many of these techniques. Like a lot of success happens in spite of this coaching, not because of it. And then the coach will take credit for it anyway, even if they're actively setting themselves up for failure. And that's like the biggest rip of all, is that you're not even in giving the success that you're promising. You're handicapping people, taking advantage of people who are actively going to succeed in spite of you, or you're kicking people down who don't succeed with tactics aren't going to help them succeed. Like if I say, one I always see, and maybe you've seen this in other realms, I can only speak to the fitness business world. Oh, you know, see how this person with no followers succeeds. And it's like, well, your strategies are built for people with followers, with a following, with a trust. If I have someone who has 200 followers, unless all 200 are completely bought in day ones who are ready to buy your ideal clients, the strategies of succeeding as an influencer are probably not going to be very relevant to me. But that's the whole thing. If you teach blanket strategies for every single market, you're going to teach coaches to do the same thing. And then it's going to be eatthismuch.com, pay a certain amount of money on a recurring basis to send meal plans you're not even qualified to send. It's going to be hiring virtual assistants. Like this culture comes from the top down. And then it just makes my industry look bad, it disenchants people, and puts people in bad positions. And so, you know, in this case here, you know, I'm developing this to get back to my specific experience, not get too off track. With this person here, you know, I raise a lot of questions, say, hey, you know, I'm trying the strategy you're telling me, and it's making people actively uncomfortable. They're verbalizing this to me. I don't want to say I'm not having questions, because I already had questions since day one, but now like it's just reinforcing, man. Like, oh, it takes time. And I'm like, does it? I mean, I feel like there's a better way here. I'm open-minded, but I'm also skeptical. And I'm not skeptical because of just inherent skepticism or imposter syndrome. It's because what you're telling me seems counterintuitive. Another example here, and this is probably more active pyramid-y, referrals. Referrals are the lifeline of how you keep a business that comes fresh out the gate sustainable. And that comes from saying, hey, I had a good experience, so I want you to have a good experience. And so I'm being told to not offer a good experience that will encourage people to want to join the party. No, offer financial incentives. Scummy. I'm told to tell my clients, hey, if you refer someone, I'll give you $100 cash, because they want cash now and immediately. And I'm like, how do I put this? I feel like that's not the best way to do this. Shouldn't I focus on giving this person a good experience? Shouldn't I focus on helping him achieve his goals? Like, is that going to help him? Like, all right, I kind of seen this movie before, but you know what? I'll try it once. And I felt weird. It felt uncomfortable. And then the person looked at me like I was crazy, because it's a crazy thing to even suggest to someone, hey, I'll give you $100 if you refer this person. That's not how you build a business full of integrity. It's how you build a business full of people that get you involved. And so I found out later, after I had initially cut ties to this person, was that the person who initially referred this to me, and I found this out from someone else who had also gotten referred to by this person. I was doing one-on-ones with this business coach. The colleague I had, who is a testimonial on his website that is using, was in a group setting. And in that group setting, he's actually seeing that people aren't getting results. Like, no one's succeeding under this pressure. I only have the experience one-on-one with the person and my own coaches. So I find out from my friend that the person who referred both of us to this guy got massive financial kickbacks from our investment. I gave him $8,500. This guy gets $1,000 for referring me. So now I'm thinking, oh, this is a guy who's trying to help me out. He's a guy who's looked out for me at my job for years, who's acted as a really good role model in a culture that was probably not that great, but he was a really good sense of integrity. And now I just got sold out for $1,000 for this absolute schmuck who's everything I thought this was going to be before I came in, but I trusted this guy. And now I'm being taught the same techniques. And that's the thing. This stuff comes from the top down. And then it really kind of just, the character growth is not worth it from any of this. Like, you can get like some kind of development from this. You can take away a life lesson, some discernment. The best foresight is someone else's hindsight. Watch this channel, watch stuff from here or similar channels, like your friend DC, or that I saw on a stream with, or any of the other. Like, these exist because enough people have gotten screwed over. And if there's anything that helps vindicate your experience or her experience or anyone else's experience in this space, is to see the red flags for what they are, understand like there's reasons why people fall prey to this, because you're manufacturing hope for people, manufacturing optimism, and then leave people even more hopeless than they started. It's so messed up. It's horrible. So when the breaking point, which I'm sure you want to get to, because I put up with a lot thus far in this experience, and I think I've sold one person with these strategies. Again, I have 85 people now. So what I'm doing clearly was everything in contrast to everything I'm showing here.
So you had 85 one-on-one clients, and then built...
No, I had probably about 12 at the time. Currently, I have 85. But
at that time, you had 12 one-on-one clients, and then you had built out this program that this coach had sort of like told you to create.
No, I hadn't built out anything, because I was selling before I was ready. So I didn't even know what I'm selling. Right. So then I'm selling this guy and then writing the program after, instead of offering something that's going to solve for him. And then, of course, the person asks for his money back, because I haven't even constructed it yet. And I'm like, it's like, oh, you shouldn't give refunds. I'm like, well, of course you would say that. You're not giving me a refund, but I haven't even given him anything. Of course I'm going to give him that. He has buyer's remorse. He's financially in a bad spot. Of course I'm going to give him a refund. And secondly, like, he clearly bought into this off the tactics you taught me. And like, it would be really messed up if I just took his money and ran. Like, dude, this is like someone I grew up with too. Like, I'm not going to ruin a relationship over a few $100. All right. Like, people aren't that cheap, at least like how I value people. So eventually, like, I'm asking, he's going to help spice up my website, and it's going to help like make it a bit more, personable, make it a more clear landing page, SEO, whatever. So I'm asking him, okay, like maybe I can still get something out of this. There's got to be something. I'm reaching, but maybe I can still grasp at some kind of straw here. So I asked him, he's not even going to help me to redo my website. He's going to create a whole new website that's clearly on his friend's separate service that is going to be structured in just their particular mold, and clearly is like a referral to his friend. And I'm asking all these questions that have nothing to do with them, like, what's my favorite animal? And I'm like,
how did I get here?
yeah, this is like that part when you see a movie, it's like, hi, my name's Harrison. I bet you're wondering how I got here now. Like, that's how I feel right now. And so then I'm asking questions like, okay, of your 8,500, what would you itemize website creation as? Like, well, I just see it as part of the overall thing. I'm like, I don't know how I can ask this again. Of $8,500, what would you value website creation from the total coaching? I'm happy to take a refund. You can even keep that and just give it to your friend. I don't care. How do we work this out? Because this isn't working, man. And we've been in like 2 months here. It's just been all kinds of madness, and I'm not getting any traction. And like, it took me like 5 weeks for even structured anything resembling, which was a PDF with just lists to like YouTube for random extras that aren't even mine. I can't charge someone hundreds of dollars for that. Like, that's absurd. That's just like, I'm all about consolidating information to make it easier, because there's a whole litany of fitness information often conflicting out there. It's my job. But again, like, I have strategies where there is consolidated video focuses that are very streamlined and not just random people like John Fit 22's YouTube video for squats. Like, it's just weird. It's the whole element. I didn't, again, if I don't even understand what I'm selling, I have to be a real sleazebag to continue to perpetuate it. And then at this point here, he's not really answering my questions. I'm like, okay, shot in the dark. I'm just going to have to come back in a year when this contract's mercifully over, and then be able to actually attempt to get my money back. So then we get to that year mark. I could certainly use the money at the time. I think I watched another, I mean, it was a video, it might have been a stream where you talked about entrepreneurship in Canada versus the US. And you mentioned how there's a pressure to have health insurance in the US versus Canada, right? Like, we don't have that. So like, for me, right after this situation, I had just recently left the job and was in between jobs, insurances. And of course, the one and only time in my life, I have 2 out-of-pocket surgeries on both my arm and my shoulder, literally in this interim. And then right after this experience of $8,500, then lose over $22,000 in medical expenses. And now we're out of the frying pan into the fire. And so now I could certainly use some of that back, but I realize I'm be fighting a losing battle until the end of this contract. So I see his most recent soapbox he's on, because he claims to be a deathbed survivor to CEO. You can look on the website and see any of the stuff he lists, or the very curated video. It's like 4 minutes long. I don't suggest you watch it, but if you want to, it's there. But he describes his deathbed adventure to CEO as if it has anything to do with fitness or your ideal client. But I digress. The point being is, his most recent thing, which again, I like to give the benefit of the benefit of the doubt. I've seen a lot of questionable integrity so far, so I have my doubts. Right now, he claims to be raising money for some kind of rare disease. I think it's myalgic encephalitis or something, and claims to be talking to Congress, claims to be doing this, all these minor steps. I'm like, it's a billionaire business coach. How do you even have time to do all this? And so he's like raising GoFundMes and fundraisers to help contribute money to this. And so I tell him, look, man, I can tell it seems like you're trying to do some good thing here, whether you are or aren't. Here's the contract. I have tried this on my own very loosely. I think we've itemized your website creation at 500, and I have sold what I could loosely describe, even if it's mostly my variation or stuff I've gotten from other sources, but what I could loosely describe as the closest thing to your product, I could probably itemize about 2,000 over the past year. Now, I'm happy to meet in the middle of 6,000 for a refund. And if you do this, because you really claim to be a huge proponent of this medical stuff, I will donate $1,000 to the charity of your choice. And he says, oh, well, why don't you just let me keep one of the 1,000 I'll donate? Like, I think you should I think if you really want to maintain your imagery here, maybe you should just let me make that decision. So I'm like, I told him straight up on the phone, look, I got to be 100% honest. And I'll tell you, I really don't think you're going to refund me. So I dare you to do it. If you don't, I mean, we'll see what happens. But like, ultimately, if you do, you name a public charity, not a private GoFundMe to send this to, I will do it of your choice. I don't think you're going to do it, but challenge is out there. Feel free. So he does do it. And that's where I got probably luckier than most. I got it in small little $1,000, $2,000 installments, which if you're a millionaire, I'm surprised you can't just do it in one swoop, but hey, that's showbiz, right? So then on his last payment, it came on, refund came on January 27th, 2021. There's a receipt there to, I think it's the Poly Biotech Institute for $1,000. I'm like, look, don't take this the wrong way. I don't really ever want to speak with you again, but good luck on your journey. And we kind of cut it from there. And since then, I've networked with another company. See, I don't want to speak for them, so I'm not going to, mention their name. They also do. That's where a lot of my actual business right now comes from. They handle a lot of the back end sales. I do a lot of the programming, and it's a really good system. We do a very high quality product, and there's an actual standardization and set of protocols there that ensure like a lot of client satisfaction in terms of how it's mandated and how it's constructed. And they have a very good system. None of this was taught in a very overpriced premium business coaching course. I have had success before working for this company, selling stuff on my own at a very good rate. I just saw this being a much faster way to do it, and would take a lot of the marketing pressure off me, because I personally am not passionate about marketing. I can do it. I have had success in the past, but it takes a lot of energy I would rather just put towards clients, and that's where my passion is. And so I just aligned in that particular nature. But I do know when I did sign up to work with this business coach, it was definitely the counterproductive, counterintuitive, left me feeling consumed, confused, taken advantage of, and just ultimately ill prepared to really help people at all. And then just it left such a bad taste in my mouth, and it took like a while to kind of regenerate that passion to actually get to the stage of where I can perform at the level I am now. Because when you get so disillusioned like that, it puts you in such a bad mental state that you don't even like want to do it anymore.
Exactly. And I feel like there's a sense of defeat that comes with that too, of like, is this even worth doing anymore? Like, why am I even building this business? Because you just feel like so disheartened from that experience. At least that was my experience, where I was like, maybe I should just give up.
And that's the thing, like there's a certain sense of like learned helplessness that's like put in with like a lot of people, and you're given like such fuzzy like psychiatric like buzzwords for how you're supposed to support yourself mentally in this, like, oh, just believe in yourself, like visualize yourself to success, even though if I'm not going to give you the tools to succeed, if you just believe it, it'll happen. I'm like, look, dude, I think you're confusing the psychological concept of self-efficacy with like having the pragmatic action steps will back it up. Because that's just one part of the equation. You can't just sell perception and then leave the whole middle part of how you actually do it out of the equation. And then just kind of, heads I win, tails you lose in terms of taking credit for it. Like it doesn't set anyone up for success, whether it's clients, whether it's coaches. And then on top of that too, especially like this is probably a feeling I had before watching your channel, but like so much of this marketing, especially on a platform, say like TikTok or Instagram, they're very much like pattern interrupt type platforms. Like they meant to catch your attention with a hook and then encourage you to read more, whether it's call to action and profiles. But you have to find some attention, whether it's guys posing shirtless or doing some crazy sort of like exercise or something. It's very hard to kind of stand out from the pack unless you niche very specifically and are very good at that hook marketing. But so much of this marketing is shown by these 10K a month business coaches. It's so cringe. It's so over the top. And then like you have like honest people like me or like colleagues of mine who like, we don't want to be roped in with all that, but like it's hard to stand on these platforms at the same time. So we're in a catch-22 where we're feeling like demotivated. Like our industry at large has boy who cried wolf themselves into the grave with all these examples of like leaving people in the dust. And then it's just acting like absolute like Wall Street caricatures instead of actual coaches. And then it just becomes this whole mess of trying to stand out from that crowd while also not being lumped in with that crowd. And it makes it very difficult to like find ways to stand out in practical measures.
That's like the hardest piece too. I know even in the space that I'm in now, I focus more on like the marketing consulting side of business. And sometimes I'll like go to make a post and then I have to ask myself like, do I sound like one of these personal development girl bosses in this post, or am I genuinely like trying to help someone? But I think like for me, because I was so deeply ingrained in that industry, there's still like parts of the way that I talk that I'm trying to like disassociate from that, because I don't want to be lumped in with the like girl boss business coaches, right? And so I'm curious to hear, I guess, how you navigate that as like a personal trainer. What are the things that you do to kind of set yourself apart from the rest of the like skeezy people that are not operating maybe ethically?
It's very difficult. That's the first and foremost part, is that nothing I say after this is going to be remotely easy, because the problem with a lot of these strategies is they take time and they take a lot of precedent to build. And so with me, like, I don't focus much on marketing because I would say my business is self-sustaining through referrals. So because of that,
awesome.
That's why it helps to work with a company that provides health insurance, for one. So I don't have to worry about that, but also I have a certain stable of leads I can then promote to have then other business come in as well through this company as well. And so with that here, that makes it a bit easier. But I still, again, there's marketing and there's branding there. I mean, I'm not going to, preach to you about these concepts because you're probably way more knowledgeable than me. But I heard this one concept from another actual legitimate mentor I had back in the day. It's like, marketing is asking someone on a date, branding is why they do it. And so like I try to take care of my branding to a certain degree, and my marketing just comes from referrals of people I've already, because if I have like, we're going over 70, 80 people, there's enough testimonials of happy people who can then get other of their friends involved too. And they're doing it through experience, not necessarily through like skeezy kickbacks. And so then what's tough about this is just, I think if you're a fitness professional, you have to dictate most of your marketing towards your ideal client in tasteful ways. And you have to just be very careful about not leading with stuff like flash, money, substance. And I think what's really tough with a lot of the tools that a lot of coaches show is that in their neutral expression, a lot of things they're saying aren't necessarily terrible. And there's a lot of context. Again, persuasion is the neutral expression of manipulation. If I'm talking someone into my interest against their own, I'm being manipulative. If I'm talking someone out of their own way and then allowing you to make a consensual decision which can benefit them and giving them every ability to choose other options or make them a parent of, I'm being motivational, especially if I'm getting them to like get out of the way of their own excuses, but not leading it with like fluff or just not having the context to back it up. Like if I ask open-ended questions like, do you feel this is the best situation? Do you feel that's going to be the situation is going to be best in alignment for you if they choose to eat junk food instead of this, and they don't have any prevailing food beliefs which would dictate referral to a psychiatrist or to a psychologist or to a nutritionist? I can do that from the position of, hey, I want to see you succeed. I know this isn't going to help you. What are some tools like stimulus control or antecedents, behaviors, consequences, things which under a exercise science degree that I have, I can teach under exercise psychology exercise psychology. And I can tell them, okay, how can a behavior that I remove can give you a similar consequence based on a similar antecedent? Like there's things we are capable of doing in certain realms that can be motivational, but someone can have the intention, the virtue to lead you kind of out of your own way and into their own wallet. And that's where it gets kind of manipulative. And so you have to have that underlying virtue and intent to do positive by your client and let that be what leads your decisions. And then from there, you can then seek out resources for the most practical ways to do that. And then even when you're in sales calls, so much of it is about being careful of your language and not send the wrong message, and being careful when you're overcoming objections in a way that you're doing it that's going to help benefit the person and not just talk them out of their own interests. And it's a very fine line. And I think a lot of it boils down to your in-depth intent, ultimately speaking.
Absolutely. No, I totally agree. And I appreciate you sharing that, because I think, again, a lot of the times I can use my channel and I can talk about, watch out for this, watch out for that. But then it's like, okay, but what should I actually be doing? If I shouldn't be doing these things, what is it that I should be doing? So I think that it's very helpful for people.
I think one thing that was like so funny, because you really hit the nail on the head on one comment I left there, I think I left a comment on one of your videos that said something like, yeah, these coaches say, oh, reach out, but don't have to reach out via like cold DMs or this, that. And I said something to that effect. And then you listed pretty much verbatim the exact thing fitness business coaches tell, which is, oh, they're warm leads. They responded to a poll in your story. It's the same thing with different letters, but all right. So like, that's the whole point, is you can't just see everyone as a mark. You have to see people as people. And that's the problem. They teach you to see everyone as someone to get money from and not people to help. When you lead people to help and you establish yourself as an authority, they will come at their own pace and their own time when they feel they're ready. Like, I wouldn't be following this channel if there wasn't substance. No one gave me kickbacks to come here to be a part of your upline. I'm here because I want to be.
You heard that first. This goes to the commenter that said, I bought my followers. I did not buy anyone.
Trust me, I love to make money from this, but I'm here out of virtue, not out of pay. So, I mean, like, that's wild. But like, yeah, like I said, it's such a very fine line, and that's what's just so difficult to really mesh with, especially if you're like, I work for a company, so I can actually market that out to people easier because I have like a prevailing pool of interested people that do in fact come to me. And it's just something I had to be far more conscious of when I was operating independently. And that made it far more difficult to actually stand out. But I think a big part of this is that I think it comes from, you don't have to name names, but you just have to like not give these people your money. Like, they are only rewarded of staying in the game because they're rewarded by people who give them the authority by giving them money and power and everything. So I think a big part of it too is you see so much of like, there's a lot of cult mentality that comes with a lot of these communities and groups, whether it's like the girl boss mentality. The flip side for a lot of men, it's usually something related to like a sports team, the military. Like we're like a squad, we're a team, and it leads to a lot of these weird toxic team dynamics where if you break away from the group think, then you're not a part of the team. And that tends to be the language a lot of men tend to face in the same environment. It's just another side of the same coin. And that's what's just so like crazy. Like, I'm not in the military, but a lot of my actual physical mentors have been. And so I have a different reverence for how all that works and how leadership works in a lot of this capacity is through character traits. It's not buzzwords and it's not acronyms. There is a value in, again, I'm a trainer. The whole point of exercise on a mental level for a lot of people is that it builds a certain sense of competence that then allows you to grow mentally, spiritually, and emotionally. So to give an example of something I've gone through that's very similar to that kind of experience, there's this event out in California called Kokoro. I actually have a tattoo for it here. It's a Japanese symbol that means the unity of the heart and mind in action. So it means the unity of just positive, good intent character traits with your decision making. It's a Japanese word that in essence means that. So my mentor, Mark Devine, is a guy who was a Navy SEAL from the 90s who was hired to help up the Navy SEAL passing rate. And he did that by bringing in a lot of these fluffy terms, but in a positive expression, visualization, positive self-talk, chunking, things that are actual tangible techniques you use to get through tough situations. So what he runs is a camp called Kokoro, where you're basically simulating the hardest 50 hours of Navy SEAL Hell Week. Now, people who show up to that, there's enough stuff online. They're not getting blindsided. They know what they're showing up for, and they know it's going to be absolutely awful. But there's a reason to do that. Like when I see people who are maybe more in the MLM business coach space who talk about like, what is your why as some tool to manipulate you? The positive expression of X there is that you look at the story of like Viktor Frankl, logotherapy, a powerful why will get you through anyhow, like his whole story. And that's where the basis of a lot of that originally comes from, at least in my experience. I could be wrong, but that's been my experience where the basis of that belief comes from. So when you're in a situation where you're a civilian who is trying to replicate what the Navy SEALs are doing for 50 hours, you don't get that through just yourself. You get that through an actual team dynamic. Like, I'm not there to help myself prove something to myself to get through the situation. I'm there because there's 30 other crazy people who are also trying to do the same thing. And my goal has to be helping the person next to me all succeed together so the sum of our parts are greater than just what I can do myself. That is probably, at least in my experience, the best expression of how to like really long physical events can be beneficial to people if you're building from a team dynamic and you actually teach like, okay, you need to visualize to see a positive attitude so you don't get in your head and then want to quit. And then you can take that into your personal life by making sure that when you run into instances like you're Maybe you launch a product and make $0. I've done the same thing, and it was very defeating. And you have to teach it as more of a learnable experience and not let negative self-talk put you into a bad spot. You don't double down on a losing strategy, but you reframe it from a certain point where, okay, like this didn't work. How can I improve it elsewise? It's, being able to actually succeed in a team dynamic and just take the focus out of yourself. An expression of your own narcissistic tendencies as opposed to actually building people up. It's not like some kind of mean girls club at the top where the people that can afford to do it and didn't suffer are good and the people that didn't are left to their own devices. That's not how you do these things. You have to actually try and build people up and try to ensure their success. And I think that's what gets missed in a lot of these situations. And that kind of dynamic you see in so many other business coaching elements. Well, it's not like a physical expression. It's not the only way you can build team dynamics or mental toughness, but it's a greater element of the culture of that kind of community, business coaching, MLMs, where it's not a team dynamic. It's crab in the bucket. It's if you succeed, it's because of me. If you fail, it's because of you. And that's not how you build a very fast moving organization. That's how you build a house of cards that's just going to fall apart. But that was my main soapbox here. It's just like when I see stuff like that, it's like I'm someone who's actually gone through experiences like that. I know the intention behind how they're supposed to be run. Again, if you want to break people down to build them up, you got to build them up in a constructive way. And it's not going to come through shaming or throwing them under the bus or using them as an outlier to try and make it seem like everyone else is fine and it's their fault if they weren't. Like that comes from the top, how all these sort of organizations tend to operate. And then that's what leaves people feeling ostracized, feeling defeated, and feeling like they can't accomplish anything. So if you are an actual business coach, and that is what you're choosing to do, you need to reassess your processes. You need to reassess, am I actually getting people successful? Are the people I'm getting successful, do they have traits that allow them to succeed faster? Is my solution helpful for everyone? If I'm a trainer, there's people I'll be better equipped to work with who will have a better leg in the game than I would. Again, even just if I'm training someone who's motivated versus unmotivated, it's a very different strategy I have to put them through. If I'm having someone who has systemically access to quality food at grocery stores, has a good job so they can afford good nutrition, has a support system that supports what they're doing. If they're a busy mom, do they have people there who can help look after the kids? If it's someone who's fighting uphill, I have to treat them with a different strategy. If I'm putting this person who's under all sorts of personal duress and treating them with the same tools I would treat somebody else, I'm just setting this person up for failure. And I can't just throw them under the bus to make myself look good because I didn't have the intellectual honesty to assess whether I applied a different strategy for this person that might help them versus this person who clearly did not.
And I think that's a big piece too. This could be a whole discussion in itself, but in all of these spaces, whether it is, personal training or business coaching or any of that, I think a lot of the times these larger players in the game tend to negate the fact of the level of privilege that they have, whether it's, a partner with a good job that can help them pay their bills while they get their business started, or any of the, a lot of these women who are, white, attractive women posting on social media are much more likely, unfortunately, to be successful in promoting whatever it is they're selling or to have people listen to them. And there's just a multitude of privileges that I think people don't recognize in their own journey. And then they go, well, I started my business with no experience, so all you have to do is exactly what I did and you'll be successful, negating the fact that the people they're teaching that to don't have those same privileges or those same resources in order to be able to achieve that level of success. Those people are literally fighting an uphill battle while this person's like, well, why are you complaining? It's easy. It's no, it was easy for you. It's not easy for everyone.
I think there's totally, to play devil's advocate to a degree, there's a positive expression of this, which is to say, hey, you're not responsible if maybe systemically things are working against you. You are responsible for making the best of your situation, but you also acknowledge there's going to be things that are working against you. And if you succeed above that, you probably are going to be the anomaly because you have a lot of things work against you that a lot of other people don't, whether it's a cultural issue, whether it's a logistical issue. It's just a whole different ballgame, even just a mindset of habit. If I have someone who's worked out for years in fitness, their identity, it's going to be very much easier to help someone like that succeed than someone who's never stepped foot in a gym before and then doesn't even believe they can succeed. I can't treat those people on the same level. And now they're responsible ultimately for making the most of their situations, they have to be, again, this is another, big concept I kind of see on the greater picture of like the realms you tend to cover, just like, oh, well, if you don't want this bad enough, then that's on you kind of thing. And do you tend to see that a lot in different realms you cover?
Definitely. But I think to a degree, there's still a responsibility on the coach themselves to recognize, like you said, okay, well, this person has never had the experience of even going to a gym, so I have to treat them differently. Whereas my point is more that these people think, well, my experience was easy, so yours is going to be regardless. And I'm just going to give you my 5 steps. I'm not going to personalize it to your experience because I don't have to, because we're all on a level playing field, but we're not all on a level playing field.
And even aside from logistics, in like psychology, there's a whole model called the trans-theoretical model. I think I saw, did you used to work at therapy at some level or like in a therapeutic
I was in
context?
addictions as a peer support. So I'm not a therapist for the record.
But you have heard of the trans-theoretical model,
yeah.
Correct? So like when I look at something like that, and you can go more to your followers to explain what that is, but I have to assess what stage of change are they ready at? Like, and this is where it comes to the part where you're acting in a business sense for yourself versus someone who's unmotivated. It's like, look, even if you do take someone who's not ready to change and you take their money anyway, they're going to fall off, and you can't just blame them. They probably weren't ready for this. And if you talk them into it against their goodwill, you're not talking them out of their own way. You're setting them for failure and then making them the fall guy for your own inadequacies to properly vet people. That's not good. So, I mean, when you actually talk to people, it's like, hey, like, do you believe you actually are ready for this? And I'll make people very aware of like what the steps are. The problem when you sell the dream to people is you don't make people aware of the realities of how difficult so many of these ventures are. Again, you posted a video where you mentioned you made $0 on a product. That is a very real reality a lot of people tend to face. And it's not just, oh, you just got to believe in yourself, keep pushing through. Sometimes the first idea you have will not necessarily work. And you're not going to get there by doubling down on a losing strategy. It's about learning to fail forward fast, learning what doesn't work very quick so you can find out what does work. And that's not something you need to pay $10,000 or someone to find out. That's just a very natural fact that just, again, if you want to pay $10,000 to someone who can teach you how to sell, ignore some of their ethics, and then need someone to hold you accountable to it, by all means, have at it. But like the fact of the matter is you really don't need that to succeed. And all it does is put you in a deeper hole to climb out of. Then it will actually probably help you succeed in the first place. There's been so many stories of people you've interviewed in the past who come in here, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, ready to rock, and are excited, they're clearly passionate, they're open-minded, and then they get disenfranchised. These people aren't remotely qualified to be giving advice to people and to charge obscene college tuitions amount for it. It's ridiculous.
You're being sold on the outcomes, not the actual like inputs of how it's going to get you there. So,
and then part of that too is if people, and this is the rub, this is the reality. Like for me, in exercise is difficult. If exercise is the pill, it'd be the most popular pill on the planet. It's not fun. You have to push yourself through difficulty and then grow from it. There'll be endorphins, there'll be positive feelings of accomplishment, but ultimately it's a difficult thing. So I'm selling people on sacrifice. I'm pushing themselves through difficulty. And when you go into a business coaching element, entrepreneurship, the dream looks sexy, but what doesn't is all the times you might get rejected, all the times you have ideas that don't work, all the times here. And if people sold them on the accuracy of that dream, many people wouldn't fall for this because you sell them on the fact that it's easy, and then you don't tell them how difficult it actually is. And so the people who see fast success are probably already going to see that success before you. And the people who don't are not being given the full picture on how difficult some of these realities are. And they are not being clear on how to connect the dots. And instead of just figuring them out, they're basically shamed for it and basically thrown under the bus. And it's absurd. If you're someone who's looking to develop in fitness or life or business, like there's much cheaper alternatives than these very inflated ones you can look for. And really don't just even take referrals at face value because there's a lot of financial incentives behind it. And when you're looking for a coach, if you're like a personal training client, again, you don't have to go to say me per se. I have a ton of people, but the fact is what you want to look for are people who aren't going to cut corners with you, people who are going to stay in their lane. If people are having like deep-seated psychological issues, there's a blurred line, but I can't be your therapist. I have to be your trainer. I can't be your nutritionist. I have to give you exercise, and I have to give you basic belief changes. And if you have people who are stepping out of their lane to provide these services for you, they're probably not qualified, and they could even do more work damage than they start. So make sure that you're very clear on the person whom you're looking to hire, that they stay in the lane of what they're good for. And if you can do that and then know what to avoid, then as a consumer, and with the whole ethos of consumer protection you put your channel through, that's probably the greatest service you can do, is knowing what to avoid and then what people are really allowed to do. And if you really kind of go by those two elements and just trust your actual intuition and gut, if someone feels off, just to steer the other way.
100%. And I think that's the biggest piece, at least for me, is like, trust your instinct. And if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
And that's just the thing people really have to understand, is that with besides just the intuitive aspect, it's like so much of doing well in life, and I don't need to be a life coach to tell you this, is not making severe mistakes that set you back. If you marry the wrong person, for instance, and then you get divorced, and then now you're paying either alimony, child support, that's costing you a sufficient amount if you probably vetted the situation beforehand. If you get pregnant before you're ready to have a kid, if you get a severe medical issue and you're paying thousands of dollars, and if there are ways you could have had insurance or prevented yourself from getting this, there's so many ways you can avoid. If you end up in jail by doing something stupid, and then you lose out on 15 years of your life and opportunities to employ, set yourself ahead. On a tier below that, and it could be arguably financially worse depending on the coach and the situation, is investing in someone who's going to set you back $10,000, $12,000 is not a small amount of money. If you want real life advice, avoid ending up in bad situations that will cost you severely, financially, emotionally. Again, if you didn't need a therapist before hiring a business coach, you probably will need one then, because a lot of these people will set you up for failure and then really set you back. And again, one of the hardest things for me to overcome is on an emotional, personal level, was how much further could I have been ahead if I had just never interacted with this person? And instead, I just set myself back, created a hole I need to get out of. And I don't know if that's your experience, but but I can see from some of the people you've had on your channel that if they're not saying it, that's some of their experience. They clearly are wondering, what if I had never actually interacted with this person? Would I have been better off? And I think that you can't necessarily change that, but if you can keep people from avoiding that, or if people can seek out solutions for themselves after the fact to help them make the most of their situation after, it's one of those oh, I'm grateful this happened to me because it forced me to don't be grateful. Be happy that you found the strength in yourself and the tools in yourself to succeed in spite of a situation. But I don't know, it's one of those things that maybe I could be wrong about. I'm not grateful any of that happened. I am grateful that I overcame it internally and that I found support systems that, positive things happen. I ended up in this channel and I'm freaking dying through some of the live streams and the videos. So that's a win. But the same time, maybe I land on this without all that happening too. So I'm not going to give the situation credit for that. I'll give the algorithm.
That's how I feel too. I'm okay, well, maybe I wouldn't have a YouTube channel if I didn't go through this experience, but in no way would I ever credit that to the person that took all my money. You know what I mean? It's
yeah, you sought out this person, at least, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't want to speak for your experience, but you already had an entrepreneurial spirit at some level or some.
Exactly. I was already in the process of I had quit my job and I was building this business, and this person just seemed oh, they have the same story as me, I'm going to follow what they're doing. But it's I would have been successful with or without them. I'm confident in saying that.
And that's one of the challenging things. There's been horrible things that have happened to me that I could use in a motivational context. So one thing and this is part of that kind of earlier question, how do I differentiate myself? I lead through my referrals, and I'll bring these situations up if I find them motivational. I could write some sad sob story. Oh, I was literally, what is it? It's September right now. March of the previous year, I'm renting a room out of my friend's place. I'm $12K in debt, and I'm in pieces. I have no arms, Mr. Potato Head with them popping off. I could write some long sales copy about that and do people into paying me, but I don't want to be roped in with these people. So yeah, I'll bring them up if people mention struggling situations, and I can build rapport from that level. but I'm not going to lead with it and make it my personality trait to get people to pity and to give me money. It's like if I go to a stranger, I'm not going to go and overshare a stranger and tell them how my dog died when I was 5. I'm going to go and like, okay, attention, I'll, ask questions here. And then if it's appropriate, I might bring up a similar situation I went through. And that might be if you're like trying to market part of the struggle. Like a lot of people, when you see in the sad strange, it's like, it's just some complete over the top hyperbole for their whole life story. And again, everyone I truly believe is the hero of their own story. I truly believe that any of the people who have on the channel, the Brittany Dawns, the Marie Folios, the Jamie, whoever, all of them, they all probably think they're doing God's work. They all probably think they're doing a very good thing. And it takes a very heavy level of self-reflection a lot of these people won't have to assess whether or not they're actually doing constructive things. And very few people are going to self-look, hey, maybe I'm messing up. Maybe I'm not doing the right thing. It becomes so much easier to throw people under the bus. And so if you're a heartfelt individual who's trying to lead with good virtue and intent, you need to constantly self-assess, check yourself. Like, am I getting roped in with that girl boss crowd? Or am I acting as change for good? And I think you straddle a very good line with your own channel for that. But also, too, it's like, I think anyone, when more of this stuff perpetuates in every individual space, it's something definitely I'm conscious of. And I would probably market a lot more if I wasn't worried about being roped in with people like this.
And I think, at least I know,
when you can have people validate that for you with referrals. And if you do that by giving them a positive experience, that can really reinforce it. But if you're leading with a positive experience, again, I think it's so different growing a YouTube channel than it is like building a personal training business, because it's not like same as a one-on-one service. I think more of your business consulting or marketing consulting would be probably more similar on a conceptual basis to what I do.
For sure.
But, it's just so different ways you have to build these things. But ultimately, it comes from, not buying followers. It comes from building credibility and a positive experience. You get more credibility when you can propose like what scam content looks like when you mention, hey, this is what I looked like years ago, and this is how I can laugh at myself. So I have the authority to call it out here, because I have the self-reflection to say, hey, this is what I used to do. This is why I used to believe what I believe. This is how I've seen it happen in a lot of fields. And here are constructive free elements where you don't have to pay, $10 million for my mastermind course. You can these are ways in which you can help yourself and put yourself in a good place, in a good direction moving forward. And then the problem is a lot of these people do just exactly the opposite, and then it just leads to all sorts of mess, like all across the board.
And I mean, that's why we're out here doing the work. We're sharing our stories in hopes that we can save, that one person that's on the border.
Absolutely. Well, I think you're keeping a lot more people off the fence and even express themselves in the comments. And I'm sure once you post this interview, I'm sure they're going to be backing it up too. So keep doing it. It's a very, I think business coaching in general, at least in its current iterations. I mean, MLMs, that kind of marketing has been around for a while, but I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you know far more about this than I do, I'd say business coaching, especially in a social media sense, where it's so easy to manufacture credibility, is on a grand scheme relatively new. So a lot of people aren't as exposed to it as they might be to like pyramid schemes.
Yeah, I would say in the last, probably since about 2015, 2016 is when I started to see the rise. But even in since I've gotten out of it, I've noticed this massive boom where everyone wants to be, this online expert. So it's pretty wild. And I think that was really a motivation for me to start this channel, was now is the time where I think MLMs were, say 5 years ago, coaching is now getting to where you're these people who maybe 5 years ago wouldn't have been interested or really been exposed to this are slowly starting to trickle in. And so as MLMs start to phase out, this is the new version. So I'm curious to see where the industry goes.
And I think part of that too is that I think a lot of people, anti-MLM content does exist out there and people still obviously get roped into it. But I think there's been so much consumer awareness to spot this stuff that people are at least getting better about it. And so you can only hope that if anyone wants just one clear-cut example of this, if you happen to end up on one of these business coaches' feeds, you're going to see, and this is just clear-cut example as is, you're going to see their sponsored paid ads, and then you're going to see the content on their page. And you're going to see a very big difference in the comments that are in the paid ads versus the contents that are on the page. The contents on the page are going to be people who are probably perpetuating the grift, who are just backing it up because either they don't want to admit they got duped, or they're going to basically just reinforce their idols. So a lot of them kind of all support each other in this kind of case. But then if you look at the paid ads, a lot of these coaches do, you're going to see the truth of how people feel. Scammer, shill, we don't trust you, just another 10K a month coach. So I think things are moving in that direction, but you can't help but as a consumer see the difference between what's commented under a paid ad versus what's commented on the page, and then not get into a sort of cognitive dissonance between the two, where you have to wonder which is fairy tale land and which is real. And once you already have that kind of feeling, that's your first red flag. Like, you already know what time it is. Like, get out of there.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and for sharing your story and your experience. I think that this was a really insightful conversation. So I appreciate your time. As I mentioned in the intro, it was really such a pleasure to be able to sit down with Harrison, hear his story, and just have an open conversation about the different tactics we see across this industry, whether it's fitness coaching, life coaching, business coaching. A lot of the same tactics and rhetoric are used over and over again. And so I hope that you, the viewer, had some new takeaways from watching this conversation. And again, if you're interested in seeing the parts that I removed from the video in a separate deep dive interview hybrid sort of video, please let me know in the comments down below. Be sure to share your thoughts, give this video a thumbs up if you haven't already, subscribe to my channel if you enjoy this content, and I will link the playlist to all of the other interviews right over here. So if you're interested in checking that out, please do so. Take care, comb your hair, and I'll see you in my next video.